What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another part of our Tekno EB48 2.2 build. This time we are working on bag J, which is going to be actually mounting the front clip onto the car itself. So we'll go ahead and we will start getting everything taken out of its bags and organized, just like every other part of the build. That way, of course, we can make sure we have everything we need and we are all nice and organized to get started here. So now we are ready to go ahead and start doing our assembly of bag J. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start out with our top plate. And what we're showing here is that the actual body post itself is angled. So you want the taller part on the back side of the top plate. And then we can go ahead and get that screwed in. This is something that is easy to overlook initially and is slightly annoying to retake everything apart. That way you can get that on. So that's why I like to start out with just getting that taken care of straight off the bat. The next thing we're gonna go ahead and do is we're gonna go ahead and start mounting our steering posts. So those will actually key into the chassis. I apologize, you can't see it super well on the video itself, but you can see now we're showing you. So they are gonna key into the chassis. Make sure that, of course, they are keyed in. That is what is going to allow it to stay locked in while you're actually mounting it and not kind of float around while you're driving on the track. So we'll go ahead, get our second one put on there. And just like the first one, throw a generous amount of Loctite on there. You don't have to get super crazy, but this is something that the screws do like to come out on a little bit more frequently. So I just like to be better safe than sorry. And if they ever get stuck, you can always hit them with a little bit of heat. That way you can take them out when it comes to do rebuilding stuff. But obviously we are just doing our build. Next thing we'll do is get our chassis brace installed onto the chassis. And then this is just kind of the initial kind of small bits to get onto the car itself. That way we can go ahead and start attaching our main points. So what we'll go ahead and do is you can see we're gonna lube up our ring gear here, our ring and pinion. And I have had questions about in the previous videos why I hadn't done that just yet. And that was just so that way we don't make a mess while doing the rest of the build. So we've got that lubed up, and then we can go ahead and start working on throwing the clip onto the chassis. What you saw there was during the front clip process, we do put the front bumper on, but you do take that back off because the bumper is going to key into the chassis. So we'll go ahead, take that bumper off and start mounting the clip onto the car itself. There's gonna be a few different length screws here. The really, really long ones will go into the very front of the gearbox. And then of course, with this, because we're going into plastic, you aren't going to have to worry about doing any Loctite at all. So we'll go ahead, get our gearbox stuff all mounted in here. You can see again, we use that really long screw on the very, very front. And then we can go ahead and get our fourth and final gearbox large screw put in. And then we have a good foundation to kind of work on, that way nothing is flopping around. Now that we have that mounted onto the car itself, we'll go ahead, throw our bumper back on, which of course is going to hold our A block onto the vehicle. So this is very, very important. So we'll go ahead, get that tightened down and into place. Now we've got the main portion mounted. We can go ahead and grab our steering rack, get those slid on to the posts. There'll be, of course, 4 bearings there. As I've said in a previous video, the metal side ones do sometimes like to fall out on that servo saver tube, so just make sure you do get those all put on. There's going to be one longer button head screw. That is going to be the screw that actually mounts the top plate itself to the chassis brace. And then there'll be 4 smaller button head screws that will be on each of the corners of the top plate. So the front 2, we can go ahead, get those guys nice and zipped in. And then for the ones that go into the steering post, because it is metal into metal, it's always good to, again, put a little bit of Loctite on there. These ones on the top, you don't have to get nearly as generous with a Loctite, but definitely it's always nice to put a little bit on there. So we'll go ahead, get our final steering post screw in there. And now we have the actual rack itself fully mounted onto the chassis portion of the vehicle. Next, what we'll go ahead and do is we will grab our smaller flathead screws These will be a 3mm diameter screw, and this is just a secondary gearbox assistant holder, I guess you could say, because obviously we have our 4 main screws in. So we'll get those 2 in, and that will fully mount the gearbox portion of the front clip to the chassis. Once we have that mounted in, our main portion of the bag is all finished up. From here, all we're gonna go ahead and do is get our turnbuckles mounted onto the Ackerman plates themselves. So this is going to be an assortment of washers as per usual. And this will, again, mount our Ackerman plates and turnbuckles all together onto the car itself. Now, in kit form, out of the box, the way that this is going to get set up is it's going to have a screw from the top, then a washer, then the turnbuckle end, then a secondary washer. That'll all mount on the top of the Ackerman plate. And then you'll have another washer and a nut on the bottom side. Now, in this case scenario for myself, what I go ahead and do is I do that washer on top. Then I put both of my washers underneath the link itself, put that all on top of the Ackerman plate, and I just have the nut on the bottom. But for kit, like I said, it's gonna be screw, washer, link, washer, Ackerman plate, then you'll have a washer and a nut on the bottom side. That way everything is, of course, nice and connected. This is an exceptionally minor change. I don't imagine it's going to make a ginormous difference, but it is something that I do have that is a little bit different than the kit form. So now we will go ahead and match that on the other side. We'll get our washers mounted on the bottom side of that link, and then we can send that whole portion through our Ackerman and then get our nut threaded on. And then that, of course, will bring us to the end of our bag J. We'll get just some final tightening here. That way everything is, of course, tight to hit the track. And then we will be all set to go. And this is how you get your clip and main steering rack components all mounted on to the chassis. So thank you for joining us today, and we will go ahead and see you in the next one.